Hi, I'm Conrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we talk to the author Brigid Delaney. For many years, Delaney penned a column in The Guardian which detailed her alarmingly numerous misadventures in life, from actor Russell Crowe offering a reward for her misplaced laptop to trying to evict a giant lizard from her country home. She also wrote a book called Wellmania, which detailed yet more misadventures, this time in the wellness industry. You might have seen the Netflix show inspired by the book, starring Celeste Barber as a version of the trouble-prone writer. But the comedy and slapstick humour of these pursuits belied a more serious intellectual side. In recent years, Delaney started to delve into stoic philosophy in a life-changing way, releasing the 2022 bestseller Reasons Not to Worry, an accessible packaging of the ancient learnings of stoicism. Her upcoming book, a novel called The Seeker and the Sage, is also about stoicism and is billed as a tale to help us navigate our divided and unstable world. She talks about this and her recent stint as a speechwriter for Federal Minister Tanya Plibersek with her friend and Good Weekend senior writer, Melissa Fyfe.
Thanks, Conrad, and welcome, Brigid.
Thanks for having me here, Mel.
So you and I are friends, so this is a strange sort of territory for me. I've never interviewed a friend like this before.
Perhaps this is the start of a new career for you where you just get on people you know and shoot the breeze.
Mel and her mates.
Yeah, Mel and her mates.
But I'm not going to let you off the hook. There's going to be a few hard questions coming at you. But first, I wanted to ask, you've had such a sort of wild career. You've been a journo, a columnist. This book, The Seeker and the Sage, is your fifth book. You've been a TV writer. I even remember a period when you worked for the State Revenue Office.
Yep, I was writing copy for the land tax section of their website.
Was that exciting?
It was about as exciting as getting a land tax bill.
And recently you've been a speechwriter. So of all the things you've done, what's your favourite thing?
I think being a travel writer was definitely my favourite. So basically you get sent, either you send yourself on a trip and you write about the amazing things that happen to you or the interesting foods that you've had or what you've seen, or else say a company might be opening a hotel or there's an experience that they want to get publicity for, so they'll send you there and you get kind of taken around and given the 5-star treatment. And that was such a great job because you're traveling, you're getting to write about your experiences and often getting access to people and places in these destinations that you wouldn't usually get access to. And then you get paid for it. So that was a dream. But unfortunately, there's only like a few people that can do that full time. So yeah, watch out, guys. I'm coming for your job.
Because, yeah, you're between jobs at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Well, I've got a book coming out. So I'm very excited about like spending time promoting that and talking to people about stoicism and doing more writing.
I mean, I was thinking about your career and how you've got this interesting divide in that the Guardian column that you did for many years was all about the crazy situations that you were getting yourself into, some of which I witnessed firsthand. But rarely did I make it into the column, unfortunately. I'm a bit sore about that still. But then there's this really serious side where you were also, you're a speechwriter and a philosopher, really. Do you sometimes think about that strange divide?
I think we all contain multitudes, and the most essential characteristic, I think, in any situation is a sense of humour. And so for me, humour and trying to see what's funny in a situation is not actually, incompatible with working in a serious job. In fact, it makes doing a serious job or thinking about serious things actually a lot more bearable and a lot more interesting because you're bringing levity into a situation. I think if you were serious all the time and just doing serious work, life becomes a bit grey. Whereas if you kind of train yourself to see the amusing side of everything you do and sometimes write about that amusing side, it makes life definitely more enjoyable.
So perhaps when you decided to go and be a speechwriter, so you were a speechwriter for first Katie Gallagher when she was Finance and Minister for Women, and then Tanya Plibersek as Environment Minister. Was that a barrel of laughs? Why did you decide to do that? I mean, it was quite a turning point for you to switch from having the kind of freedom of your own column to going into the belly of the beast, the political beast. Why did you do that?
I see working in politics as a staffer as being a privilege. Like I support the Labor Party and have for a long time, and their ambitions. I grew up in the sort of Hawke Keating era and was really inspired by politics back then, and always wanted to work. Like I did youth parliament as a kid. I was quite nerdy that way. Never wanted to be a politician, but always wanted to work within the environment, and read Don Watson's Recollections of a Bleeding Heart when I was younger, and was really inspired by that book and inspired by his account of political life and being an insider in terms of you're in an office, but you're also a writer and you're observing it. And I just thought that sounded like the most fascinating job. Labor governments don't get elected all the time. It's kind of was 11 years since the last Labor government. So if you want to work as a speechwriter for a Labor government, you do have to bide your time. And, I think you spend time within these offices, and then when you leave, which I've done, they just empower you to kind of know so much more about how policy is made, how it works, what the pressures are on the individual ministers, which are quite immense, how things get decided. And then as a speechwriter, it's like, how do you convey sometimes the really kind of thorny sort of policy things? How do you convey that to a general audience? How do you also help the minister when you're working out a speech? How do you help them think about an issue in terms of how they'll talk about it? So it felt like a really incredible space to be working in, and was very happy to have that experience. But it is grueling, and it does take me away from travel writing.
I was going to say, I mean, you to sort of live up to that romantic notion that you kind of got from Don Watson's book.
I mean, I didn't have, like, Don Watson obviously had this incredible access to Keating and was there in the room for a lot of those big decisions. And it certainly wasn't the case in my experience. I was very much removed from, if there's a big decision made in, say, cabinet, sometimes you find out about it through reading in the paper or, a conversation with a colleague. But I think as someone who's a journalist who's interested in public life, who's interested in Australia and the direction it's going to take, and its history and what we are as a country, I think spending 3 years in a political office is a fantastic. I peek behind the curtain, see it as a great privilege. So yeah.
I mean, your new book, The Seeker and the Sage, is about stoicism, and it's your second book on Stoic philosophy, which came from the ancient Greeks initially and then the Romans. You're obviously deeply into Stoicism, and you try to live your own life as a Stoic. As I was reading the book, I kept thinking, I wonder how better our political class would be if they were all Stoics. Did you ever dispense any Stoic wisdom around the halls of power in Canberra?
It's funny, like when the book came out kind of quite soon after I took the job, and quite soon after, this is Reasons Not to Worry, quite soon after Albanese government had been elected, and my publisher sent a box of books to the PMO.
Do you know if they read them?
They were for the staffers. I think the people who bear the burden of a lot of the stress are the people who are, whose names you'll never know, who are sort of, working out the policy or assisting in parliamentary aspects. Like, those are the guys I think that really appreciated having some sort of book that may or may not have helped them. I definitely sent copies to a handful of ministers, and a lot of them don't have time to read. So
it's a bit sad, isn't it?
Both my ministers that I worked for read read Reasons Not to Worry, and it was really nice to sort of reflect with them about whether or not, whether stoicism could help them with their challenges. But both Tanya and Katie are naturally sort of stoic women.
Yeah, do you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. They've both had big, interesting lives, adversity and struggle and determination. But I think the way they've overcome things is very much in keeping with the Stoic philosophy.
For people who maybe are coming to Stoicism fresh, can you give the listeners a rundown?
Yeah, sure. So, look, in very simple terms, the word Stoic comes from the old Greek word stoa, which was the painted porch where Athenians used to gather and hear, philosophy and talk about philosophy. And so the people that gathered under the porch near the marketplace became known as the Stoics. And they are essentially a group of philosophers that were engaged in civic life. So a lot of them, particularly in the Roman period, were political. So they were, like Seneca, for example, was a political advisor to Nero. That didn't work out so well for everyone. And Marcus Aurelius, of course, Roman emperor, who used Stoicism very kind of directly while governing. And it was used to prepare sort of young Romans to go into public life. So it is very compatible, I think, with people who are working in politics. But essentially the basis is you can only control a very small amount of things in life, and that is your actions, your reactions, your own character, and how you treat other people. And everything else is outside your control. So rather than spending time suffering, getting angry because your Uber Eats is 20 minutes late and you're hungry, but there's a massive thunderstorm outside, so the driver could have, on his bike, might have been hit by lightning or whatever. Like, you can't necessarily control when that food's going to be delivered to your front door. So why suffer trying to change something that you can't change? So that was kind of, in a nutshell, this sense of what you can and can't control. And they also had this concept, which I really love, called ataraxia, which is just equilibrium, well-being, trying to be chill. No matter what happens, fantastic things happen, you get great news. It's okay to be kind of happy, but you don't want to go crazy. And conversely, if something terrible happens, you don't want to go into the depths of despair. You kind of want to maintain an emotional homeostasis, which allows you to move through life without these huge highs and lows that so many of us are kind of, felled by.
You've not studied philosophy formally, and yet you've written 2 books about Stoicism. Your first book was a big success. Have you had much blowback from academics, people in this area who professionally consider themselves experts, that feel that you may not have been qualified to write the books?
Yeah, sure. I've had quite a bit, and including on live radio, like on the BBC, on Women's Hour, which was like just horrific. They got a professor from Oxford, I think, who was like a professor of Stoicism, and she was appalled that, people like me were kicking around writing about this sort of stuff. But I mean, what I say to her and to others is like, my book's an entry level. It's very basic, and people, can come into it who don't have any grounding in philosophy. It's simple, and then if they like the philosophy, if it chimes with them, they then progress and they get more sophisticated books, like maybe this woman's book or books written by academics. And so it's good in the whole ecosystem of, I think, Stoicism to have people at the ground floor like I am, and then people much higher up who are contributing more sophisticated kind of interpretations of Stoicism. I think there's a place for everyone. I also think like Stoicism was of this on the streets. Like that was the great thing about that time in ancient Greece, is like it was very egalitarian. Like men and women were not seen as different in Stoicism. So back then, for a very hierarchical system, women were kind of non-persons back then. Women, men, slaves, non-slaves, black, white, Stoicism saw everyone as equal. as long as they had rationality. So it was it was a really open forum for people to come and learn. And we're in a kind of post-religious age where, I found this after the pandemic, where people needed some sort of framework. Like people were struggling without a sense of order or ethics that they've been taught. And stoicism is a really good, I think it's great if you're secular or agnostic or whatever, and it provides a cradle to the grave sort of way of living that I think is super. It's got lots of integrity. It's really ethical. It prevents you from suffering more than you need to suffer. It's simple to understand. So yeah.
But how would you, I mean, the world is so chaotic and crazy at the moment. How would you apply Stoic principles to intractable problems like Gaza or climate change, those sorts of things?
Yeah. So, I mean, go back to the control test, which is, where like it's the kind of foundations of stoicism, which is like, can I, sitting here in the studio in Melbourne, can I control what's happening in the Middle East? No, I can't. I'm not Netanyahu. I can do certain things that might try and persuade others or influence others to think a certain way. I can definitely, protest, or I can donate money. Like there are certain things, but I can't control the outcome of that war on my own. And if I did assume I could control it, then I would be suffering because I'd be feeling like I'm not making a difference. So stoicism isn't necessarily about solving the big global problems on your own. It's about working out what you can do that can make a difference. And that could be things like forming a group that acts with others to exert pressure. But once again, you can't control the outcome. So you can do all the things to try and exert pressure on your local MP around climate change or around the Middle East. But because those things are ultimately outside your control, you should not presume to have an outcome that you desire.
So the new book is a conversation really between a journalist who reminds me a little bit of you, Brigid.
Oh no, they're like this journalist is in a bad way. That is not me. Not what. In fact, I based the character on you, Mel.
No. Nothing like me. Nothing like me. And then she goes and talks to this wise Stoic man.
Mm.
Why did you decide to structure the book like that as a conversation?
I think because like it's the original way of learning Stoicism was through dialogue, was through it was letters. So Seneca wrote this had this great book which was letters to a friend of his, Lucilius, a younger friend, where they would try and help each other therapeutically applying Stoicism to the problems. So these letters are great. They're everything from, I think Lucilius is getting sued at one point. Seneca's annoyed because he's living above a gym and there's all this noise and he can't sleep.
Is that in the Greek period or was that in the Roman period?
It's Roman,
In the Greek period, they were nude in the gym, weren't
they?
They
were nude in the gym, yeah. But he's hearing these, he's hearing the sound of, he calls them cheap massages. So
oh my God,
obviously flesh being slapped and barbells being chopped on the floor. So they are, they're writing to each other and they're talking about their problems, but they're also using Stoicism as a remedy through letters. And it's a great way of learning Stoicism. And I think self-help books, of which I would characterize this book and my last book, they're meant to help the reader. Like they are kind of self-help. But there's only so much I can write about myself and Stoicism. Like I haven't experienced a lot of the things that the Stoics really focus on. Like I haven't experienced my own death. I haven't experienced illness. I'm very lucky at this point in time. I haven't experienced a lot of grief, haven't experienced sickness, like serious sickness, have experienced intermittent forms of poverty, but not serious. So this format allows me to really delve into these problems through character. So it means that I can broaden the scope out to really cover cradle to grave problems that a lot of readers will have. without being kind of locked into my own experiences. So the characters, use of character allows me to do that. And the dialogue allows me to tease out, like I have problems with stoicism. It's not a full answer to everything. There's real issues around social justice, as we've touched on.
Yeah.
And I think desire, it doesn't do desire very well.
I can see that the journalist in the book does struggle with that. Trying to want to be passionate and then being told by the old man that, you can only be so passionate.
Yeah, you can't have these big highs without these big lows. So,
He doesn't sort of like the idea of a crazy crush, for example.
Doesn't like crazy crushes, doesn't like even lust, he's a bit down on lust. He's a bit down on too much comfort, on too much enjoyment, because, the Stoics say that could be taken away at any moment, so get used to discomfort. Yeah, there's a lot of harshness in Stoicism, as there is in life. So I really wanted to explore that harshness through characters.
I mean, one of the other things I think you might struggle with, but I certainly did reading the book, was that Stoicism is very hard-ass about trauma. It's like, it doesn't matter, what sort of trauma you've experienced as a child, what you've been through as a person, the things that have happened to you that are not your fault. The Stoic attitude is like pick up, pull your socks up and sort of carry on, really. And I don't know whether that's aged very well in terms of what we know about neuroscience and those kinds of things and child development. And
yeah, they didn't know any of that stuff back then. And so we've got to forgive them a little bit. Just like they didn't know about hormones or the unconscious, when it comes to desire. They weren't, they didn't really know about women and like the women's cycles. And so their approach is a little bit limited. But the trauma thing, I think, is they say you can control your character. So you do have agency in terms of how you respond to something. And they say with trauma, you can choose to be limited by it or expand or just, have a life that is not curtailed in any way. You don't see yourself as a victim. So they do debate about that in the book. And that's something, I guess, for readers to work out how comfortable they are with those discussions around trauma. But I think it's not an invalid perspective to advance. I think it's good to be challenged, and it's also good to give, people that have been through some rough stuff, give them some agency and some credit that people can overcome things. If they're badly treated, they can actually choose a higher road, and they can have a good character, and they can choose how they react to something. So it can be empowering for some people to hear that message.
Do you think Stoicism is having a moment in the manosphere?
I'm not in the manosphere, so it's hard to know. I mean, you go to an airport bookshop and you look at like the business books, and there is always, a number of Stoic texts all written by men, and I think probably for men. Ryan Holiday comes to mind, and he's I think he's a fantastic guy, and I buy his books for my dad. But I don't see why it should be just for men. Like I feel like the philosophies helped me immensely in my own life. It doesn't seem to be gendered at all, so it's always been confusing to me as to why it's been picked up by men. Maybe it's the word stoic appeals to like a sense of toughness. I think women are tough, and I think, women need stoicism as much as men do. Women can benefit as much as men. There has been a big push, say, there's a kind of feminized self-help, which is like Brené Brown and Gwyneth Paltrow, and it's all about vulnerability. And stoicism in some ways is not about vulnerability. It's not saying vulnerability is bad, but it's certainly not saying it's a virtue. So there is a kind of gendered divide between what self-help people want or respond to, but I would say stoicism for everyone.
I mean, the Stoics are famous for doing some crazy things like dressing up in embarrassing outfits to remind themselves, I guess, to keep their ego in check. What, if any, of these sorts of things have you picked up from the Stoics?
Well, I was doing embarrassing things before I got into Stoicism. think I went to a music festival with you, and because I was cold in the middle of the night, I ended up putting underpants on my head just to keep myself warm.
It was a really good look, by the way.
Yeah, it was a great look. So their whole thing is, wear stupid clothing, be ridiculed, and see that it doesn't actually affect you. Like, you don't need to spend huge amounts of money on fashion to be a good person. So that stands today. I follow trends less than I used to, because, the Stoics are like, why are you following the herd? It doesn't actually, it's meaningless. Like, if you happen to have odd socks that day, if you've only got two clean socks, one's red, one's black, go for it. Just wear the odd socks. Doesn't matter. Of course, I did not do that in Parliament House, but I did, I do care less now because of, Stoic values.
And what about this idea of when you're stressed, going to your inner citadel? What's your inner citadel?
It's the opposite of an inner child. So an inner citadel is like a phrase used a lot by Marcus Aurelius. It's kind of like it's a place it's your inner fortress. So it's a place that can't be breached. So it might be that you're getting a flight somewhere, you're in an airport lounge, and airport lounges these days have become really crowded and really messy, really gross, and kids are screaming and there's announcements and the news is on and your flight's delayed and you're just super stressed and you're in a stressful environment. So Marcus would say, find that place in yourself that withdraws. If you can visualize it, great, but it's almost like meditation. You just go to a place where none of the outside stuff can touch you because you're in a fortress. And you visualize that and you just feel a little less reactive. So you're a little less likely to be rude to someone who works at the airport lounge. You're a little less likely to have that third glass of wine in the lounge because you're stressed. You're retreated in kind of plain sight. And I think it's a skill that everyone has the capacity to build.
So you think your life is a lot better since you've become a Stoic?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Because I used to spend a lot of time worrying about stuff that I have no control over. So, for example, I don't know, you might be looking at something on Instagram and there's a great party that's been and gone. Everyone's looking like they're having the most amazing amount of fun and you weren't invited to that party. Now think about how much energy is spent going, oh, why wasn't I invited to that? Oh, that looks so fun. Oh, I've missed out. I've got FOMO and oh, my life's terrible. And I thought these people were my friends. And so you just get into this spiral that can actually last like for a week. Whereas Stoicism says you can't control if you're invited to a party or not. You can control how you respond or react. If you know you're going to be upset by seeing something that you're not invited to, if you get FOMO, you delete Instagram or you be very selective about what you follow or you just train yourself to care less. So it's small things like that. I'm yet to confront some of the bigger things in life that we all face, like, serious illness, grief and death. And Stoicism is helping me prepare for those things.
Because you rehearse in your mind, like
I
as the
rehearse
Stoics.
in my mind, yeah.
Like you imagine people dying that you care about.
Yeah, all the time. And I'm throwing a massive party for this book launch. Sorry for those that aren't invited.
You've just created huge waves of FOMO.
But I'm throwing a really big party because it's like I love my friends so much. I love my family. I want to celebrate every moment I can. We're not going to be here forever. Like, people drop dead all the time, and it's important to gather people, to have fun, to create memories while you can, rather than deferring things. So the Stoic use of time and the focus on celebrations and enjoyment is also something that I really love.
Your third book was Wellmania, which was your adventures in wellness. And I haven't asked you this, but Celeste Barber obviously played you in the series. What was that like, watching her do that, play kind of you, really?
Well, she ended up making the character very much her own character, but like Ben Law and I chose her. We were like,
He was Ben Law was
yeah,
a Good Weekend
co-creator and Good Weekend contributor. And so when we started developing Wellmania, we were like, who's going to play the main character? And it's like, it's got to be Celeste. So I knew her like sort of on Instagram. So that's how I just connected with her on via social media. I'd never met her. I'd never seen her act in anything. Just thought she had a brilliant openness to her, and I loved the physical comedy. I really love slapstick.
She's fantastic at that.
Yeah, she's so good. And so it was lockdown, which was great for us because it meant that all the actors were out of work. So we were like, Celeste, would you be in our show? And I sent her the book, and she signed up straight away, and we had such fun creating it. So, she was
different. She was a different person. Like you didn't recognize the person on screen.
No, there was one scene that I thought, oh yeah, this was me. She's trying to get something out of her bag, and there's like all these cables and chargers. I thought, oh yeah, that's me. But look, she did coke at the Walkleys. I've never even been to the Walkleys. Like, that's not an experience I've had. But look, she's smart, funny, talented, and she made it her own.
You've got to also, I'd love you to tell me what your favourite wellness treatment is, because you've done some crazy stuff. But what's your, like, not your craziest, but your, like, the one that you go to that you like, I want to do this thing because it makes me feel really good?
I quite like, and I've done this with you actually, hot cold plunges.
Yeah, they're good.
They're really good. So in Bali, had an all-day workshop of getting into a 1 degree ice bath, and lately I've been going sauna, ice bath, and it does feel like you are high when you get out.
It feels amazing.
It's so good. And it's very trendy at the moment. They're springing up everywhere. And
yeah.
So that's my current favourite wellness treatment.
After you were involved in the making of Wellmania, what were your impressions of the television industry?
I think it's a tough industry, and
because Wellmania didn't get picked up for a second season, even though it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was shocking to me. I was like, it was like number 2 in Sweden.
Wow, the Swedish loved it.
But also, look, everywhere else, like it did really, really well. Netflix, they're a global behemoth, and it was really hard to, like, they're not transparent necessarily as to why they renew things or don't renew things. So I never found out why it didn't get renewed. It did end on a cliffhanger with Lorraine getting hit by a car. So I often get asked. I was in Thailand last week, and I was at this gym, and one of the trainers, we were talking about Wellmania, and he's like, what happened to Lorraine? Like, we never found out. And so that was sad. But like, I think with TV, it is like, it's a tough industry to survive in that industry, particularly as a writer or a show creator. You've got to have balls of steel. So hats off to anyone who, is in there and making stuff. I think TV is facing the same challenges that everything's facing at the moment, which is shrinking attention spans and, the rise of short form video and all that sort of stuff. So it's fighting for its life. I'm pretty grateful Wellmania got made in the first place.
If you could meet one of your literary heroes, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. One of my literary growing up, I loved J.D. Salinger. Like, I just thought Catch from the Rye was my favourite book. But then you read these biographies like later on about how he liked young girls, and he was, and I'm like,
don't meet your heroes.
Do I want to meet him? I met Joan Didion once in New York at a reading. Her husband had just died, and I was at the signing table, and I got up to the front and I gushed, and I was like, I've always wanted to meet you. I love you so much. You're I'm your biggest fan. And she just kind of looked at me with this dead stare. She was just so cold. And I was devastated, and I was out with a New Yorker later, and I said, oh, she was terrible. And he's like, number 1, never meet your hero. Number 2, don't have heroes. Yeah. So maybe there's maybe literary figures that I'd like to meet are none of them, because their best selves exist in their books.
And what are the sort of 2 or 3 good books that you've read lately, if any? Maybe you've just been in the Thai gym eating protein.
No, I've been on a reading binge of late. So I've been reading a lot about AI. So there's one called The Empire of AI, which is Karen Howe, which is like a good, very meaty book. I've read the new Elizabeth Gilbert memoir, which I have mixed feelings about. Not great. It's kind of okay. Pretty wild. I've read a book called Rejection, which is been described as a guy called Tony. I can't remember his last name, but it is America's first incel novel, which was pretty shocking.
Wow. Okay. So it's from the perspective of the incel.
Yeah. So that was pretty dark. I'm reading a lot, loving all the books that are coming out at the moment. October's a big month, so looking forward to getting stuck into the titles that come out that month.
Well, thanks very much, Brigid, for coming
Mel.
in. Thanks for having a chat.
Fantastic. Great to chat.
That was author Brigid Delaney in conversation with Good Weekend senior writer Melissa Fyfe on the latest Good Weekend Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Chi Wong.